Thank you all for joining us this evening for Parenting in a Pandemic, a program presented to you by the Mental Health and Wellness Center at Molloy College and the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program at Molloy College. I am Kellyanne Brady. I'm the Clinic Director at the Mental Health and Wellness Center, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Dr. Laura Kestenberg, the Program Director at the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Department, and Francesca Janello, the clinical mental health counseling intern who's working in a private practice as well as collaborating with the Mental Health and Wellness Center at Molloy College. I'm so pleased to have them here today to talk to you about a very important topic, how to manage parenting in the midst of a pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Francesca, to take us away with the group.
Sure. So it's good to be with you all. We're going to talk about parenting in the pandemic. So first, I just wanted to go over the group agenda. So what we'll do tonight is talk about some group rules, do brief introductions to your comfort level, and then we're going to talk about parental anxiety, how to talk to kids about the pandemic, how to support some of your older children, or if you have adult children, managing expectations for yourself during this time, what self-care might look like right now, and then we'll talk about 2 coping mechanisms that might be useful. And we'll also have some intermittent time for processing or sharing. So for the group rules, you are free to participate however you feel comfortable. So your camera can be on or off. I just ask that you keep yourself muted unless you're speaking, but you are also welcome to use the chat if you're more comfortable doing that to contribute at any time throughout the program. If you do want to speak, you're also welcome to do that. We just ask you use the hand raise function so that we can see that you're raising your hand. It's going to be important for everyone to be respectful of everyone else in the group. And be mindful of what you share, because this is a support group. So just make sure it's something you're comfortable sharing in this setting, knowing that we're being recorded and that it is a workshop. So for the introduction, and again, this is going to be to your comfort level, but you can share your name and the age of your child. That might help us sort of cater a bit more to who's in the group tonight. And you can do that by raising your hand, or again, you can just put that in the chat if you would like. And then it would be really great if each of you could say, what you're hoping to gain from tonight's workshop, or if you're not quite sure and you just learned about this group 5 minutes ago, what is a word to describe where you're at today coming into the group? So you can take a minute to do that now. And Dr. Brady, you can let me know if people are putting things in the chat.
Still waiting on some responses.
That's okay.
Anybody wants to jump in? So we have one comment in the chat. Someone has 2 daughters in college and a 10-year-old at home.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. So we're sort of navigating how to, manage this time with your adult children and grade school. Yeah, we'll touch on both of those things in our presentation. And as we go along, again, anybody is welcome to either raise their hand and speak, or to share in the chat. But for now, I'll move on. But again, you're more than welcome to introduce yourself at a later time too. So I wanted to start by defining parental anxiety as a way to sort of frame and normalize what's going on. So this is something that I came across, actually, it being called parental anxiety syndrome, as a way to understand what's happening. So there's a sensation of these high levels of anxiety regarding school openings, play dates, using daycare, basically any setting where a parent might have to leave their child with somebody else. And it has been compared to the feeling of separation anxiety. And it's sort of being described as a way that this burnout from constantly having to transition to a new normal is manifesting for a lot of parents. So there are symptoms that overlap with other mood and anxiety disorders, and there's symptoms that overlap with fatigue, burnout, things that are not so clinical. So panic attacks, low stress tolerance, sleeplessness, irritability, general body aches and exhaustion, and then that low stress tolerance leading to an increased conflict with spouse or family members, particularly around what choices to make in terms of, sending kids to school in person, or what the boundaries are with having them interact with other people. So this might be something that folks are experiencing and not really knowing that, there's a name for. We're actually seeing this in such great frequency that it's now going to be called parental anxiety.
So, Francesca, if I could just jump in there, we have some more from the chat just to kind of fill you in. We have a participant who has a 5-year-old son, and they're here to understand how to balance work and parenting during a time like this. And the word that this participant chose is overwhelmed, which sounds exactly like what you just talked about. Another participant is here to gain a working rapport and techniques to work with high school age clients, which is definitely something that it's not only parents that have to deal with kids, but also counselors and teachers and educators and school staff and everybody who comes in contact with these kids during this time. So I think that there'll be something helpful to take from this group for you as well.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that, Dr. Brady. And Francesca, an amazing job with your presentation, your PowerPoint so far. I know you put a lot of work into this, but I'm glad that we're going to include adult children and older children, because a lot of the emphasis in the media has been on homeschooling and really taking care of very young children. But with the specific nature of the pandemic, when you have older children, so for example, I have a freshman in high school and a freshman in college, there's all sorts of new things that you have to deal with on a daily basis in terms of like how much should they socialize with friends, how much should they go in or out, come in and out of the house if you have other family members at home that are compromised. So again, a lot of the media has focused on homeschooling and dealing with the very young children, but I think having older children who now have to be more secluded or be more in the home, they can have a lot of issues as well. And it brings up a lot of new issues for parents.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are a lot of resources out there for younger kids. And so I think, we'll start by talking about how to approach these topics with maybe school age children, but certainly can focus on older children as well. There's a lot there. So in thinking about how to talk with younger children about the pandemic, one important thing to do would be to encourage them to ask you questions. And that helps to sort of assess what their understanding is and what they've been hearing, so that you can respond in a very concrete and developmentally appropriate way. So something important to note here, right? Every kid is different. And so it might be useful to start by really just answering the question that they've asked, because some kids need more information to sort of lessen their anxiety, and some kids don't want that much information. And you probably know which one, yours might be. But to start by just addressing what they're asking. Another important thing is to be honest, right? If you don't know the answer to the question, it's okay to say, I don't know, because we are all learning together during this time, and sort of modeling that it's okay to not know is really great. Another thing that is important is to limit your child's access to news that is related to COVID-19. So even if that's just sort of having the TV on in the background and them having this, hearing coverage in the background, that's been linked in some studies to, kids developing PTSD symptoms. And that's, of course, a more extreme example, but it can be really distressing, even if it seems like they're not paying attention. So being mindful of what you have on in the background. And as you're sort of having this conversation, to in before you sort of move on to the next thing. So asking, what is it like to talk about this? How do you feel? And then to get some concrete feedback, you can, I'm sure many children, know what the emojis look like on your phone. So, which emoji do you feel like? Or if there's a book that they love, like which character, which feeling do you identify with right now after having these hard conversations about COVID? Another really important thing that came up in some of the research that I was doing is feeling like it's okay to communicate that you have needs right now too, right? With everything feeling different, with there being a shift with kids being home a lot more, it's okay to say, mom or dad or whomever needs a break right now too, or this is something that I need, just like we've changed what you need during the day. Which is also good modeling for self-care, which we'll get to a little bit later. And then the idea of a talking stick, which is not new, or some sort of object to say, everybody has a lot of feelings right now. If that's having your experience of overwhelm, we're each going to get to say what that thing is or what we're feeling. If there's a sense of chaos when this conversation comes up. And then I want to just share, this is a list of actual questions that you can ask in that conversation. So, what do you know? What have you heard? Also noting people might not refer to it as COVID or coronavirus. You might call it something else, whatever feels appropriate for your child. How do you feel about what's happening? What are your friends talking about? Knowing that they're probably getting a lot of information and maybe a lot of it is not accurate. So taking the time to, again, explain it to their need or their comfort level in developmentally appropriate terms. How long have you been feeling however way, if they express a feeling? And then talking about their experience in relation to COVID, but not exactly COVID. Tell me some things that, are different at school, or some things that are the same, some things you like that are different. What do you miss that's the same? Those sorts of things. And checking in about, what can we do better if you're having a sense that your child is overwhelmed. That can look like your child being irritable, having a difficult time sleeping, maybe not wanting to socialize with people as much, or whatever anxiety looks like in your child. That can be a good time to ask, how can we make this better?
Francesca, we have a comment from our participant.
Yeah.
If you raised your hand and you'd like to unmute yourself to ask your question or share your comment, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi. So these are great suggestions, and hi, Francesca.
Hi, Dr. Dada.
I wanted to ask how, not all, these are great open-ended questions and, a good way to get children to share. But I'm sure you're aware that certain children don't naturally share, even with open-ended question, no matter how you twist the question. So my son's usual response is, I forgot, for everything. And he's only 5. And I can just imagine how this is for older kids who are in, high school, who, tend to not want to share with parents. Perhaps some of my friends' children are this way. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because young kids have a limited vocabulary to share their feelings. And so that's when my personal preference and love for play therapy comes in. And, what are you picking up in their play? What are some themes that are coming up? You might be able to sense what's going on for them internally through some of the stories that they're telling. Maybe there's particular TV shows or characters or stories that they're drawn to during this time. And you can also use, there's certain worksheets that have different feeling faces on them, that might be a good tool to say, well, what feels the most like you? Which one of these looks the most like how you feel right now? And maybe even that's too direct. So maybe going back to the play and what you can observe through that is a good way to get a better understanding.
Those, I'm going to jump in for a second. Those are good, really good suggestions. Hi, Hia. One of the things I've used with children that I've worked with, and also having friends and colleagues who have young children, is, you know, in counseling and psychology, we really try to individualize everything. So what does your son, where is his passion? Like, what does he really respond to? Is it a particular character in a show? Like, you know, you're his biggest fan, so you know what he really likes, and then trying to integrate that. So, for example, I worked with a school-age child who's obsessed with SpongeBob, you know, so we couldn't talk about the pain that that child was feeling about their parents' divorce or the separation, but somehow we integrated SpongeBob, you know, very, you know, wasn't really obvious, but just, you know, in the conversation or in the play that we were doing, or drawings. So, you know, stereotypically, little boys like to build, they like to knock things down, they like to play with building things. They might have, you know, again, this is very gender stereotyping, but you know, what is it that the child likes? So let's say with Superstorm Sandy, when that happened, and that was scary for a lot of children, you know, working with drawings of the storm, working with play, role playing, so different things that speak to your child, and then it's like a hook or a way to start, you know, getting at it. And they're not gonna, you're absolutely right, they're not gonna express everything, they're not gonna sit and have a discussion, but it's a way for them to work it through, if they have stuff to work through. So,
And how, I mean, I'm just curious because you also mentioned how the focus is always on little kids. Well, I have one of those, so I don't want to keep the focus on them. How about teenagers? Like, how, I don't know that not all of these ideas may work with them so well.
right. So again, like sometimes it's talking about it, and then some, like I have clients who have teenage children at home, and you know, they've used the opportunity to do more things with them. So things that they wouldn't be more open to. So they've had like a sushi making night, or they had, you know, something that would appeal to an older child, or they've made Shutterfly books about, you know, what they're doing, or they've had, you know, cook-offs. So sometimes just actually just connecting through activities rather than just having these, you know, intense conversations about it. And then when you're doing something together, it hopefully will come up. But if not, at least there's a connection, there's some sense of normalcy. One mom, I don't know how she does it, but she started bike riding. Like usually there's a school bus picking the kids up, and now she has more time that she's home, and she actually rides her bike with the children to school. Like not all of us can do that, but you know, things like that that she would have never done or had the time to do. It's very hard when you're juggling, trying to be on Zoom meetings and get things done, and then having either teenagers or people at home that you have to still carpool or still do things. People have done a lot of memory books that I know of. So you can do it just with photographs and get it printed on a regular printer, or like more complicated memory books, cutting things out of magazines, cutting things out, pictures, drawing, pasting them, just to kind of memorialize what's, you know, what's been happening to all of us. And I don't know if we'll get to it, but something that both children and adults are feeling is anticipatory anxiety. Like you talked about parental anxiety. So like now the next thing is, okay, now there's a vaccine, and just we've gotten used to the new normal, and now there's going to be a new normal. So just trying to be one step ahead if your children are worried about going back to school or seeing friends and things like that. Sorry, I don't want to, we should get back to the presentation.
I do just want to share one comment that came through in the chat. It was said that baking together is a great way to engage while creating, and I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, no, that's Perfect. That's sort of what I was thinking, right? If there's a sense that a child or an older person is really anxious, and you know that there's a thing that helps with that, to just do the thing. It doesn't always have to be this like formal sit down conversation, as Dr. K was saying. But yeah, thank you for your questions and comments. I really appreciate it.
We do have one more question from somebody who's raised their hand. If you want to unmute yourself and jump into the conversation, you can do so now.
Okay, so the thing that that I see a lot of frustration with is when parents don't agree on like how to have play dates, who to let in the house. This one's not safe, and this one, you know. So that's where I think like a lot of frustration really arises for kids, is when the parents are not on the same page as far as like especially the play dates and are we going to visit grandma? Don't let her in, you know, that kind of thing, you know. So if the parents are both on the same page, I think it will reduce a lot of stress for the kids. So you got to do a lot of that planning behind closed doors when the kids aren't around, and fight it out when they're not there, and then come up with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my input.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. The thing that will probably be the least distressing to the child is to, you know, not see that conflict play out before them, or to see it and then have there be some sort of repair, some sort of apology, clarifying conversation. I'm actually thinking, you know, when I was talking to some people about this, there's a sense of like, you know, we actually have rules in our house, but we see other kids are playing with their friends, or other kids are having sleepovers and doing this and that. And that can be difficult to see if that's not what the protocol is in your home as well. But I definitely agree, right? Having to present as a united front when we're talking about protocol, because it can come across as confusing if that's not the case. Thanks, Frank. So, touching on college and adult age children, really allowing there to be space for the grief that comes with not being able to sort of do the normal events, or have these milestones altered. So that can be job loss, or even just entering the job market at a really strange time, loss of social connections in terms of their friends, romantic relationships, lacking the social connection that they would get starting a new job. If they are, I know that's been a big upset for a lot of people, starting a job and, you know, only getting to do your onboarding and meeting people on Zoom is very strange. You know, for people who have graduated or moving into a dorm, not being able to have access to those same events, there's a lot of grief that comes with that. And it's important to really validate all of those feelings of loss, and to take those concerns seriously. I think it can be kind of easy to sort of say like, well, at least you get to go, and sort of gloss over the child really having to, or adult having to really manage those expectations and figure out what it looks like to do it differently. One way that you might be able to support your older children is by staying connected, encouraging them to keep structure in their daily schedule. So, you know, it depends on your relationship, but, you know, for some people, it might be really useful to stay connected in the sense of encouraging them to, you know, do some sort of physical movement with their body, get outside, eat healthy. For other people, it might be best to, you know, just stay connected and be encouraging of whatever they're able to do. But in the research that I was doing, you know, staying connected, having emotional support is up there in terms of what's going to be most useful for people who are navigating these transitions. Another big theme that came up is really reminding, especially people who are trying to navigate the job market right now, or kids in college, that there's real resilience and flexibility that they're developing due to, you know, being in this stage of life during a pandemic, and that this is something that has come up as being really marketable. In the research that I've done, people really talking about how, you know, adult kids, college kids who are navigating this time are really showing that they're resilient and flexible, and that that's really an attractive thing in a job candidate, which is not something that I thought of. Another thing, sort of touching on your point, Frank, earlier, talking about boundaries explicitly, especially as the holidays come up. You know, for adult children that might be living with you now, or, you know, kids that are in college and coming home and visiting, really being very clear about what your expectation is, asking, you know, questions about what their boundaries are like when they're outside of the house and what they're doing. Just being clear so that there's no confusion when the time comes to gather, if that's something that you're comfortable doing. And then to sort of just say, you know, recognizing that their life has been upended, especially if adult children have had to return home and wouldn't have otherwise, or if there are students who really were wanting to live on campus and dorm and now have to be home instead. Just really recognizing that that is a difficult transition, as it is for you as well. But not having the expectation that it sort of be the same as when they were home when they were younger. And having, again, explicit conversations about boundaries and what it will look like for, you know, this many adults to be in the home right now. So now we're going to talk a little bit about managing expectations. I say parenting while working during a pandemic, because I find that a lot of folks will say, like, you know, I need to be doing X, Y, and Z as a parent. And because we've been in this pandemic for a little while now, there's a sense of like, I should be used to it already. I should have my act down already and it should be easier. But that's not the case for most or many people. So, you know, for this section, just want to say, like, check your expectations. Are they realistic? What we think we should be able to do is often going to end up maybe feeling a bit disappointing then if we can't do it. And it's hard to expect to be able to do everything you could do pre-pandemic, given everything else that's going on. Another thing I think would be useful is to just have this check-in with yourself. Like, what are you thinking about? If your days are filled with like, I should do this, I should do that, oh, I forgot to do this, I should have done that, which I imagine is the case for, you know, many of us, parenting or not. You know, just being aware that those thoughts can be contributing to this feeling of, you know, not being successful, even if you are doing all of these really great things for yourself and your family. I don't think we necessarily say it often enough, but you should think about what you're thinking about and see how that is contributing to your mood or your feelings of how you're managing this time. Guilt, as I think someone mentioned earlier, you know, about not being able to do or not feeling able to do parenting and working full-time or part-time to the extent that you would like to be able to do. It's really hard. It's easy to just say, like, let it go. But I think reframing it as, you know, when you have that feeling of guilt, it's just an invitation to notice it and say, okay, I'm feeling guilty, you know, I'm doing my best, or I'm doing X, Y, and Z, or I have a plan to make this better. So I can let go of the guilt for now. And that's not just a one-time thing, right? That will come up, and it's a constant invitation to sort of let it go. Embracing good enough parenting. We talk about good enough concept a lot when we talk about attachment, but the idea of good enough parenting is, right, as long as you're covering the basics right now. I imagine many of you are, you know, giving your children shelter or supporting them in that way, feeding them, taking care of basic emotional needs. Like, that's really great. Embracing the idea of doing a good enough job right now. This sort of goes in with checking your expectations, reworking your to-do list. So if we have a really long to-do list for each day, and then we get to the end of the day and are not able to have accomplished that many tasks, it's a good idea to think about reworking it and putting less things on each to-do list for each day, so that you don't have this feeling of perpetual, like, I failed because I didn't do all the things that I needed to do. It might just not be realistic. So think less, think smaller, if that's something that you're able to do. Something else that I really have enjoyed talking about with clients is decision fatigue. So, when you're looking up articles about, how to manage parenting and doing virtual school for kids and things like that, they'll often say, like, put structure in your day. And so I would like to add, planning the night before, things like that. They'll talk a lot about that. But the idea of decision fatigue, is this notion that we get really tired of having to make all these little decisions all day, every day. And so if you get to have 5 or 10 minutes the night before, or a 5 or 10 minutes in the morning where you can say, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do about it. If this happens, this is what I'll do about it. So deciding in advance, like, if this Zoom call disconnects like 3 times and my kid can't focus and X, Y, and Z happens, like, we're going to call it quits for that class for this day. Or, if this kid is having a really hard time and they ask for this extra snack today, they're going to have the extra snack, or they're not, right? Just making these decisions in advance so that it's not like you having to make this tough call when you're in the middle of trying to log into your own work meeting, and there's, this feeling of being flustered and overwhelmed. Making these decisions in advance so that you don't have to think about them during the day can really help with not using as much brain power, not feeling so exhausted, if you've already thought about some of these things ahead of time. Permission is something that I also like to talk about, just giving yourself permission to even make those calls and say, like, we're not going to do a certain thing today, or we are definitely going to do a certain thing today, even if it's hard. And we'll talk more about that when we get to self-care. And then identifying your own needs. So physical needs, like moving your body or going outside. Sensory needs, like, maybe it's lighting a candle or a diffuser, having something that smells nice, having something that tastes good, lowering the lights so that they don't feel so, exhausting. I know so many of us probably have headaches from looking at the screen all the time. And then psychological needs, right? What are those? Knowing your limitations. So if you reach a breaking point, like, take a break, that's okay. You can come back to whatever the thing is. So, right, I was talking to someone who said, like, the similar idea of, this Zoom call for my kid disconnected 3 times and it's not happening. Like, the Wi-Fi, it's not happening today. So, if that's the case, it's okay to say, we're taking a break. I will come back to this in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But I just need a second. That's really okay, and quite good modeling, if your child gets to see that and be a part of that. And then finally, we have boundaries. So really drawing that line in the sand and then saying, like, this is it. This is what I'm doing for this day or for this time. So I imagine that work life and parenting life feel like they sort of blur into each other. And so, maybe it's something like, I'm only going to answer work emails if I'm sitting at my desk, or, I am going to take 10:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. and that is going to be time where I don't do anything work or kid related. Even if it's very small, just having some sort of boundary and then sticking to it can feel really empowering. And we need structure the way that our kids need structure too. And stop me if there's any more comments in the chat, or if anyone wants to say anything.
Sure, there's something in the chat right now, but I know that something that I wanted to kind of jump in with is definitely structure, and how important that is during these times to, I guess that falls under boundaries, but like just having that structure for myself and really laying out what I need to do when in order to maximize my time, but also know that there's certain times set aside for certain things so that things, like you said, don't start to blur into each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably glossed over it because I feel like we're hearing this all the time, like create structure in your work from home life, but it can be just make the biggest impact on our days still feeling somewhat normal, if we're even going to use that word anymore, because I don't know what it means anymore. But yeah, with that being said, I mean, reimagining self-care, which is another buzzword, but is really important. So again, managing those expectations, whatever you used to do for self-care pre-pandemic is probably, or maybe is, but might not be able to happen right now. So again, thinking very small. So, if that's doing a stretching video or a yoga video for 5 minutes or 3 minutes, if you can find a guided imagery meditation on YouTube for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? All of those things are better than nothing. And at the very least, give you a minute to sort of check in with yourself and your body, to help you just get back in the present for a moment, even if you're not doing these things full out. That can be really great. So options for self-care that are shown to reduce stress are some form of exercise or moving your body, and having an emotional connection to something or someone. So thinking about those two categories if you can. So that can also look like, a very brief exchange with a friend via text, even if it's like you send them a picture of something and they send you a picture of something and you laugh. That's great. That's also better than not taking a break. Self-care, of course, there's lots of options now for mental health services. If you wanted to do virtual sessions, sometimes that feels hard. So there are also, apps that you can use where you can message a therapist instead. There are a lot of options if you're wanting more support. There are also lots of support groups out there as well, a lot of free ones too. Social media is probably a double-edged sword right now, as it is usually, right? So it might be a way to feel connected to other people, but if you're noticing that there are certain accounts or certain people you follow, and you feel worse after looking at their stuff, where you feel like you're comparing yourself to their ability to parent or what they're doing with their time in the pandemic, like this is a great time to unfollow those people or mute them, because that's not needed, right? To support your mental health. And then just keeping in mind, right, in case there are those feelings of being selfish or guilty for having the self-care time, that it's important for you, but it's important for your kids to see that self-care is important, to see you modeling that. And it's important to connect with your kids and not sacrifice your personal mental health, right? So if you are doing well, your ability to parent benefits from that as well. And if anybody has anything that they want to share that has been useful for them during this time, especially if it's something new that you might not have done before, you're welcome to share that too. So I'm wondering, this can be related to self-care or not, what has helped during this pandemic in terms of parenting, in terms of being in both of these roles of person who's working and person who's parenting at the same time. You can, put that in the chat, or you can share, or you can just reflect on it quietly on your own. Even if you haven't acknowledged it, I'm sure that you're intrinsically doing something that is useful for you during this pandemic.
I was just going to jump in when you were talking about structure, but on the other side of that is flexibility. So I think when this all started, I really wanted, okay, I'm going to provide structure for the household, and we're going to do this, and this is, downtime, and and then having, an adolescent and then a young adult come back who everyone has a completely different schedule right now in my household. So really respecting their structure, that their structure might not be my structure. So my high schooler has to get up at 6:30 in the morning to either go to face-to-face or by 7:20 or start Zooming by 7:20. Whereas I have a college student that's up late, they have a whole different lifestyle now, staying up late, working on term papers and getting up late. I have someone who's elderly in the house, so, completely different schedule. So just really being flexible. So whoever, can join into my structure is great. This is when I'll try to do these things, but really taking a step back and looking at their mental health. So like every person in my family structure right now needs for their own mental health to abide by structure that might not, be my structure. So really being flexible and respecting that. And then I think for those of you who have younger kids, I don't know if it's become apparent or not, but a 5-year-old might want to Zoom with their friends, even if they're just giggling for 10 minutes, in front of the screen or acting silly. But that just like how we might want to have, people are now having, or I don't know if we're doing it now, 9 or 10 months in, but the wine Zooms or, having wine or cocktails. But I think that, with our adult friends, like little, kindergartners need to have that playtime recreated, like however best it can, like through Zoom, just to see their familiar faces. And some schools and teachers are doing that. They're checking in with the kids, and some of them are not able to, and this is like an amazing presentation full of ideas. But if you look at the news or the statistics, child abuse is really scarily high, on the rise right now. And, reports to, child abuse hotlines, domestic violence. So the amount of stress and panic in the homes and people at their breaking points is real, and it cuts across all races, all ethnic groups, and people I think are ashamed to talk about how stressed they are and how much they might have yelled at a child or how much they might have lost it with a partner. So it's hard, so I think just trying to step away before those things reach that point is really important, and teaching your kids to also step away, and just flexibility, because all rules are different right now. And I think both friends and clients who have come to me with incredible creativity during this high time of stress is amazing, right? So baking, as somebody said, cooking. Like I know for myself, I'm cooking, and I usually wasn't in the home, and now I'm in the home all the time. So cooking, baking, even though I might not feel like it sometimes, and asking a child to participate wherever they are at their age ability. Any kind of things to do around the house, different kinds of, like I said, photo books, just new traditions. It is a time, like if you actually have the strength to do it, like to start a new tradition, could be small, that you can look back to and say, oh, we bonded over that. So, but it's, the three of us during the presentation really acknowledge how hard this is for working parents and also non-working parents. So, my 2 cents.
No, thank you so much for adding that. Yeah, there's a sense of like we should create structure and then need to be completely flexible within that, and go with the flow to the best of our ability, because it's so hard, and that probably can't be overstated how difficult it is. So thank you for adding that. Dr. Brady, do you have any updates from the chat, or it's okay if people don't want to share and they're just reflecting on, what's been useful for them during this time?
Yes, we have some great comments in the chat. So going back to what we were just talking about, someone commented, yes, absolutely. I started in March with a wonderful schedule that the 5-year-old loved, and things were very good. But as workload increased, the schedule started to dissolve. So we often set out with good intentions, but we also have to be okay with something not being okay. As cliche as that has become, that saying, it's so true. Like it's okay when things start to not work anymore. Another comment that we have is that this person has relaxed some rules around screen time for this person's 10-year-old. All of this 10-year-old social life is virtual now, so she's allowed much more screen time than normally allowed. Very understandable there. Sometimes we have to make adjustments in our expectations. Going back to our expectations, yes, if we were able to send our kids out into the world to be with their kids in person, we would definitely do that. But now we have to realize that that might not be the safest option. So we need to adjust our expectations for that. Someone also added, one of the things that helped and hopefully helped the 5-year-olds was doing something creative together, drawing, crafting, cooking, baking, or even watching a movie together and talking through it. Love that. Someone gave into puppy requests back in May and thought they would regret it, but it's turned out that a dog is healing. Yes, pets can be very healing. Going for walks forces this person to take some alone time, as well as taking one of the kids with them on walks gives an opportunity for some important one-on-one time. I love that. So a couple of great benefits there, exercise, getting you out of the house, and also bonding time with the puppy, but also with the kids as well. And Dr. Kestenberg is also sharing in the chat that many people have gotten a dog. It's amazing you're doing all of that with your children. And so yes, definitely great things going on. So yeah, these are some great things. And I know you have a couple of more tips for us. So I'm going to have you go on to your next slide if you want to share these skills that you have to wrap up with.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you for sharing. So I just want to close by going over some coping mechanisms. I imagine that each of us has experienced a feeling of overwhelm in our bodies, feeling sort of flooded emotionally. And so these are both grounding exercises. So the tip I really like for anxiety, I also really like it for when you have a feeling of anxiety in your body and you can't quite tell why, but there's just that tension. So what TIP is an acronym, and it stands for temperature change, intense exercise, progressive muscle relaxation, and present-minded awareness. So ways to interrupt that anxiety, you can start with the T and then you can move on to the next letter if you still need that. So for temperature change, this is great, especially as winter is coming. We often will get really heated when we feel anxious. And so, taking a step outside into the cold, having a cold drink of water, just grabbing something cold from the refrigerator, sticking your head out the window, that's often really helpful. If you want more support, you can do this intense exercise for the I, which looks differently for everybody. So that could be, 10 jumping jacks for one person. Somebody might need to do a lot more because that really forces our breath to change if we're starting to have hard time breathing or taking shallow breaths. The P for progressive muscle relaxation. So there's actually a lot of guided progressive muscle relaxations you can look up on YouTube, or you can just go through it yourself. So the idea is to start either at the top of your body or the bottom of your body with each major muscle group and tense your muscle and hold it for 10 or so seconds and then relax it. So you might start with your shoulders and hold them up for 10 seconds and then relax, and then go to your biceps and tense and hold for 10 seconds and then relax, and go through each to become more grounded in your body. And then the final P is for this present-minded awareness. So something that you can do for that is to look for certain things in the room. So you can say, okay, I'm going to look for 5 blue things in the room and focus that way, identify 5 things. Or you can do 5 things that you can see. What are a couple of things I can hear? What are a couple of things I can taste, touch, smell? And use your senses in that way to come back to the present moment when you are feeling really overwhelmed in your body. So that's a tool that you can take with you. And then we also have the stop method, which I like. That is a tool that you can use also when you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't want to be so reactive. So stop is also an acronym. The S stands for stop or freeze. Don't do anything, don't say anything, give yourself that momentary pause, take a step back, and sort of look at the situation from an aerial perspective or a bird's eye view of what's going on here, who's saying what are the feelings that are coming up, and then with that, taking the step back with that aerial of sort of survey of what's going on, proceeding mindfully. So what's going to be the most useful thing for me to do in this moment? And I just think it's a useful acronym to sort of remind us we can pause, we can take a step back. We don't have to react to everything so immediately. It's okay to take a minute. So those are two tools that you can use. And you can also Google them. There's plenty of worksheets and reminders about what the different things mean. But just wanted to make sure you had something in case you were feeling, anxious or overwhelmed in your body. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. Would like to hear, feedback if there's a particular takeaway from what we've talked about tonight, or even thoughts or feedback about those two coping mechanisms I just shared. Maybe you've used them before and you found them useful, or you found them not useful. But feel free to share in the chat or to unmute yourself and share. I'm definitely taking things away from what each of you have said you've been doing during this time. Maybe I'll get a dog. No.
I just want to say this was lovely. Thank you very much. And I think the key to all of this is knowing when to be structured and when to be flexible. And I don't know, that's the $1 million question. But thank you for all the input and advice.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way of summarizing a lot of it. Yeah.
I also wanted to jump in. Where and when appropriate, like this is a unique time where your kids might see you in action, like at work, and actually might see what you do. And and a lot of the structure, or how serious people are at work, like people are now used to like their kids coming in, like your colleagues or your supervisors are able to tolerate, like your kid might jump on your lap, or your dog. I mean, that's happening more and more as this goes on. So instead of being stressed by it, I think a lot of us, are like getting the kids out of the room or pushing them out of our space. Maybe it's okay to find a time when it's a meeting that's more open, or you're leading the meeting, to have your kids participate and see like who you really are professionally, like what you're doing. Like it's an incredible window into, like, we're all living in the same space, and yet I see us a lot of times everyone's in a separate room, like, right, and we're trying to divide everyone up. Like maybe it could be a time for your kid, if they're able to do it, to see what you do and then ask you questions about it. Another thing that I've seen people do is like it's like a creative thing to do, but like maybe a time capsule for your family that you're doing now, right? Because there's so much negativity about what's happening in the pandemic. Maybe something special that you'll share and you'll like open up in a year with your child, like something that you did together, something positive, like pictures of the puppy, getting the puppy, or whatever it is that you did that's unique to this time, and like rewrite the story, right? We talk a lot about in counseling psychology, like narrative therapy, rewriting the narrative. It's such a heavy, dark, negative story, like on the news, like trying in some way to rewrite it for your own family unit, which, might take the edge off a little bit.
Absolutely. And it was also an idea was shared in the chat to do a family puzzle where we work together to find the pieces and put them together. And I think that that's a great way to build collaboration skills, to build problem solving skills, and also builds connection. If you think of the metaphor of the puzzle, to build connections with each other and find ways to work together instead of pushing each other away, as you were saying, Dr. Kestenberg.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are great.
One more comment in the chat, if I may. It was also added that someone is going to definitely set some boundaries around work and even maybe remove work email from your phone. And this time that we're so connected, I think that can be very helpful because, not only do we have it in our home offices, then we're carrying our phones around the whole house with us too. So it may just be overload in the same environment in too many spaces and not enough time to shut off and remove yourself from that stimulus. And also another comment added was it always helps to be reminded that we're all facing similar challenges and doing the best we can. And I really love that because I think that really connects us all, and that what was the metaphor that or the image that I've heard before? We're not all in the same boat, but we're weathering the same storm. So we are going through all of this together. And even though our circumstances may be different, we can all come together to really, get through this and share our ideas and our skills to help each other get through.
I really like that. I think that's a great way to sort of end this. We're coming all from different perspectives, but doing this together at the same time. I just wanted to offer some resources, especially for younger ones, even for preschool too. That Mount Sinai has some really great videos about how to talk about COVID and how to explain boundaries and things like that. And then there's another great website we found, pandemicparenting.org. They have a lot of webinars and then recordings that you can listen to about different parenting topics. And that is made by, I think, 2 psychologists. So if you're interested, you can look at those. And just want to say thank you for joining us. You can always reach out on the Instagram or Facebook or email if you have any questions or want to get connected for counseling or more groups. But it was good to be with you tonight.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you so much to Dr. Kestenberg and to you, Francesca, for presenting and giving all of you and sharing all of your insights into this topic, and to really help bring us all together to discuss how we can really get through all of this together. And if anybody is searching for additional support or knows of someone who would benefit from additional support, the Mental Health and Wellness Center, if you're not familiar with it yet, is a community mental health center staffed by amazing clinicians from the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Master's Program at Molloy College, supervised by licensed mental health professionals in New York State. And we're here to meet all of your mental health needs, including individual, family, couples counseling, and group counseling. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook for mental wellness tips. And you'll be able to check out our YouTube page for great resources. We're really starting to put out some great additional coping skill tips. If you just need a little bit of support, check out our channel. There might be something there for you. But feel free to join us for future workshops similar to this. And if anyone has any ideas on topics that they'd like to see us present to the community, feel free to share that with us by emailing mhwc@molloy.edu or giving us a call at 516-323-3854. We're happy to hear from you. We're always open to feedback, and we love to connect with everyone. So feel free to email us and reach out, or check us out on Instagram and Facebook. We love to connect. So thank you again to our presenters, facilitators, and for everyone, to everyone for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.